Welcome back to AR's Tales, aka the A.R.T podcast. I am A.R. Bala, and today I am joined by Paul Williams, horror fantasy author, just released The Shadow of Hades a couple months ago. I read a little bit of it, hella excited to get into it and talk to him about it, chop shop with him. Paul, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm phenomenal and improving, as my friend's father used to always say. Um, where can people find you? Social media links for the people listening.
I'm sorry, my computer's acting up a little bit. What was that?
I said, where can people find you? Social media links. Where can for the people listening?
On Instagram, I am Paul Williams underscore books. On Twitter, I'm field underscore pixie. And I'm kind of workshopping my website right now. So I don't really have a link for that just now. So
Okay,
yeah, all my other links for my other social media are on uh, my Instagram.
but and there's also the Amazon link itself and Goodreads and where all the books can be found. There's currently 3 books out now that he's made, right? Since I believe
Yep.
2017, which is pretty awesome. Which is Isiana's Web, Shadow of Hades, obviously, which I just said, and man, I'm going off memory here, so I think the second one is what, Door of Dead? Is that what is it?
Uh, Called Mortal Faith.
Mortal Faith. Where was I getting Door of Dead from? I do remember the cover. It's like a red and black thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the cover. It's very like it's like iconic. I was like talking to a couple authors that the simplest cover ends up being like the most interesting and like the most marketable, even though it has like nothing to do with the book sometimes. Like Twilight is the apple. Where is the apple? That's not a book about orchids or orchards, whatever. There's no apple picking. No one's talking about an apple fantasy they have. But it's the cover of the book, and I mean, it's a fun. It's a we're talking about Twilight right now. I mean,
Yep.
incredibly bestseller. But moving on to that, how did you get into writing?
Well, ever since I was young, I had like an interest in like I watched a lot of TV when I was young.
Mm.
And I saw some of the previous interviews you did with, and they were talking about like how they did action figures and how you would always like make really complex stories with those.
Yes, I
And that
did.
was always what I did too. I had a lot of those, and basically when I was really young, I would make like fan fiction about the shows that I was watching and everything. I was really into that. I actually thought I would be like an artist when I grew up,
Mm.
but then I just started writing, and I found out that I guess that came easier to me. So I just kept going and going, and then I just published.
That's awesome. So, what? Out of curiosity, what shows did you do fan fictions for?
Uh, I was always watching Cartoon Network when
Hell
I was
yeah!
younger. So, when they showed anime like Naruto, things like that.
And what, like, so you were watching like Dragon Ball Z? That was one of your go-tos back in the day too.
Never watched Dragon Ball Z. Never watched that much. Really, when I was a
Interesting.
kid.
Well, you were watching it on like a Toonami, right? Like the robot thing that would like go on in between.
Yeah, tuna.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. No, that was awesome, huh? I always feel like TV
Yeah.
back when like we were younger. Well, I guess just depending on like generation, but I guess now was everything more into tune like social media, which like kids find more entertaining. But back in the day, like they had like so much like little like events and things like that. Like I remember when I would be playing outside and like we didn't have like a watch or like a phone on us or anything like that. But if somebody just said it was 7:50, I was like 7:50, yo, Disney Channel's about to drop a movie in 10 minutes. I gotta go. I'm telling that that was like a common thing I had in my head. I used to always love watching TV too. It was my I mean, to this day, it's one of my like it's almost unreal how much like entertainment I can derive from it now. Like I'll sit down and put on
Yeah.
a good TV show or a movie, and like the smile on my face, my dude, is like, hing. What about you? What is I like that idea that you also kind of are kin with the idea that you made like complex stories out of your toys. A couple questions off that because not a lot of people kind of agreed with me there. One, what were the stories? And two, did you actually end up using any of those storylines again in your current writing, and do you have any plans to?
Well, I was in like elementary school at the time, so
Mm.
they were pretty like childish kind of stories for the time, if I can remember them. Um, yeah, I didn't really keep a record of them, but I definitely remember like just making use of everything around the house and just like a little table would be like an island that the characters would go to
Mm-hmm.
when I was like playing with like action figures and stuff. And it was just like so fun, just like making up all these stories and turning different things into other things and just uh, all that. So I guess I still kind of use that thought process, but with like history and the real world and just turning it around.
I like that concept a lot. Cause especially growing up, my favorite cartoons were like Brandy and Mister Whiskers or like Tom and Jerry when they would show like Jerry like his house, that his desk would be like a thumbnail, or like his sink would be like I don't even know, but like a used balloon. I don't know. And just the way that development of it, I love the way that people can turn around things that seem nuanced and like who cares about it to us, and they can just turn around to a whole interesting plot on the other end of it, man. And you know what really caught my ear? So what, you're a fan of history as well?
Um, I'm getting more into it now a little
Hmm.
bit, but I guess yeah, I've always been interested in history.
What time frames would you say?
Um, I was interested in like mainly like ancient Greek, like Mediterranean kind of cultures and things. Not as much medieval, but definitely like ancient Roman kind of times.
Yeah, that was definitely my like first really deep into like history, was like that Roman time. I'm now getting more into the medieval, like sword and feudal type of like system. But yeah, Roman mythology, Greek mythology. I grew up with Percy Jackson. That was my guy. That was
Yeah,
my
yeah.
book. That was my series. I think that was the very first time that I ever had like a depth of like, because I wasn't a Harry Potter fan. I wasn't that crazy into like magic when I was younger. So like that to me was my book. I remember I would beg my mother and I would hawk it. That was the very first time that like, I mean, thinking back on it, I did research. I would like get to the back of the book, find out the website, go to the website, scroll to all the research, and oh, when's it coming back? Oh, in 3 months, bet. And like mark it on the calendar, go to Walmart, get it for like $17, knock it out that day, like no problem. Oh my God. I'm looking at a couple right now in my office. It is unreal that like I don't know. I guess it's the reason why we get into this. It's like unreal how much emotional ties you can put into like text, and how like not only is it like for the author to write it, but like to think that like somebody will treat your work like that one day.
Yeah, I hope so.
That's the dream. So, how did you get the idea of your first book, Isiana's Web?
My first book, um, was actually I pronounce it Eisenan's Web.
Oh, I'm
It's like an
sorry.
anagram for. Oh no, you're good. Nobody can pronounce it.
Isanaya?
For Eisenan.
As Say it again. I'm sorry.
I, Eisenan.
Isanan. Okay.
Yeah, it's an anagram for a Nazi, the African spider god, trickster.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah.
AKA Leslie.
So that was so that was kind of a part of the idea. Yeah, was that American Gods?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't seen it. I've been wanting to read the books, but
But how did
the
he know that I
story
was
kind of
talking
got
about
great.
then?
Huh?
How did he get the reference if you
I've
had
seen that.
oh, like memes and
I've seen a
whatnot?
few clips. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I had like two different stories, and one of them before the Eisenman's Web was like a fantasy, and it had a lot of similar characters and concepts and things. Um, so I took a lot from that one, but I wouldn't say there's like the main idea that sparked it. I was really wanting to make a story at the time, so I was just like cobbling all these ideas together to try and make something because I knew I wanted to write a book. I guess that's where it stemmed from, the need to like write.
Mm. And kind of going back to the whole Percy Jackson thing, what was your like first book that you were like, yo, what is up?
Percy Jackson. Yeah, in third grade, my teacher she read it to the class, and
No way.
like everybody was getting together. We were all getting like really hyped for the chapters, and we were like talking about the movie because the movie was coming out the same year, and we were all just like, "Oh, what'd you think about this character or this? What happened here?" And the teacher would like get in on it too, and it was just like this huge ball rolling experience of like, "Wow, this is interesting."
God bless that teacher, man. I didn't have anything cool like that growing up. What was all boring ass books? I had to like always buy my cool ones. I remember Percy Jackson, a friend of mine. Like I to this day don't have a copy of the Lightning Thief. I borrowed it from a friend, and then like I started like I became like a fan like after that. And, like what Sea of Monsters was the second one. That was like the introduction of his brother, the Cyclops.
Yeah.
Gangster, man. I'm telling you.
Mhm.
Uh, are you a fan of any of the new stuff? Like any of the because he goes into like all every other like religion and like mythology.
Yeah, I finished the Heroes of Olympus in high school, and I tried to read Magnus Chase, the Norse one. I couldn't finish the first book.
Why?
It felt really formulaic. Like he was just kind of like doing the same thing he did with Percy Jackson, and it's like, okay, this is interesting, but I don't really feel the need to continue this because I feel like this is the same story, same. It's almost like the same character. I don't know.
Now that's interesting, huh? I because I never got into it. Just I'm assuming I'm a couple years older than you. Just time frame because if you finished that in high school, I finished it middle school. Like I think I finished Heroes Olympus. That came out for me in like seventh, eighth grade.
Mm.
Or maybe you're older than me. Wait, how am I doing math? What am I thinking about?
I think
Whatever.
20.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm 26. Well, 62 if you do it in dog years, whatever. Um, man, I have to ask. Then the progression of your reading, right? When it went from Magnus Chase, and you were like, "Oh, this isn't that cool," and you're in high school. Where do you go from there? Do you go into the darker? Do you get into the Edgar Allan Poe? Do you get into? Because I actually saw that you had a quote from Frida, which is gangsta. I feel like a lot of people don't know who she is.
Yeah. Um, I never got much into like the kind of classic stuff. Around the same time, I was reading Game of Thrones
Mm.
by George R. R. Martin. So I had gotten like into the show kind of, and I was like, let me read all the books. Um, and I was hoping he'd be done with the next one by the time I finished, but that's not gonna happen.
Well,
Um,
guess you never know. Unlikely though.
yeah, yeah, I kind of got into the like classic kind of stuff, like here and there every now and then, but I was never like taking the time to say, oh, here's a book that, or here's a story that by Edgar Allan Poe. I'm gonna read all of this in one time. I was more of like picking pieces of it and like collecting in a sense.
Mm. What about like TV shows and movies? What were your kind of what were your go tos when you started like well, I'm assuming anime fans are anime fans for life. So I'm assuming you still watch anime in like some sort. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yeah. Um, I had a friend that was like really into anime, so he's having me watch all the series that he's like, oh, this is so good, you should watch this. So I'm taking his recommendations right now. I don't really search for it on my own though. Yeah.
I'm on the exact same boat as you. I as it goes, and even then I prefer the live action. So like it'll take me a while to actually for a recommendation to come through. But what I'll watch, it'll be like fire. You ever watch Captain Harlow, the space pirate?
No, I haven't heard of that.
Really good one. It's like I feel like it's on like every free platform that you can imagine. But like the way they twist like sci-fi and horror and that is just like really cool. Like their dark energy engine is like a shadow type of thing, and it seems like it's just like death every time it like shows up. It's awesome. It has like a whole bunch of like crazy smoke that like comes up by every time it's being used. Oof. What
Mm.
about Marvel? Did you get like are you into that? Did you get into that when you were younger?
I watched the movies, like the first few movies, but I never got into it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I geek over that. It's unreal. That like to me, that's my favorite type of writing. That it's like so interwoven to the point that like even the dialogue in book one is like gonna reference something that happens in like book 22. It's
Mhm.
phenomenal.
With comics, I've been more of like a DC kind of person, but mainly just like Teen Titans and stuff because that was one of the shows that I watched growing up, so I had an interest in that.
I was a lot more DC when I was younger, but I feel like they just like dropped the ball so heavily when I've been like older that it's hard to defend them. Because I mean, yeah, exactly what you said. Teen Titans, the Batman series that were on Cartoon Network, all fire. The Batman in the Bold and the like the OG one, the like just the Batman, the one that has like the big fat one.
Mm.
Oh, and Batman Beyond. That is to this day I don't
Oh yeah.
understand why no one's made that into a live action yet. I'll lose my mind. I think it's because like their idea of Batman always has to be like this like really rigid body,
Hmm.
like Christopher Bale or like 6'3", like it's cookie cutter. Every Batman has to look around the same, and then you have Batman Beyond, who's just like this like teen, could be anything, could be a Spanish kid if they wanted it to be, which
And
is
now
why.
it's Robert Pattinson is gonna play the new one, so we'll see how that goes. Back to Twilight.
Yeah, that's a really weird one because he started like to me. I'm sure he did like work before that, but to me, his first movie was like Twilight, and then depending on how you feel about him, XYZ, and then he starts making all these movies afterwards that are just like actually pretty good. Like I actually feel like he's a pretty good actor now, like especially with like his like track record and everything. I haven't seen
Mhm.
Tenet yet, but I am man. I want to watch that movie. He's in in that movie too.
I haven't seen any of his like movies recently, but I definitely heard that he's done a lot of good movies recently.
The if you're you said that you weren't really into like that time period, but there's a movie called The King that it's about like King Henry VI.
Yeah.
Phenomenal, and people said that he like. I feel like I'm a little like I'm like too nice when I give reviews because when I'm into a movie I'm into it. Like a lot of plot holes sometimes like I only catch plot holes like in the second viewing because in the first time I'm just like in the movie I'm there whatever you tell me I believe uh and I had a friend of mine tell me that his French accent sounded weird, and I was like, dude, that sounded phenomenal to me. I don't know what you're talking about. He sounded French as shit. Could have renamed himself Croissant. But going on with that idea, so you go from your first book. How did you start? Because the second book that you followed is a short story is two short stories. So how did
Yeah.
you develop? How did you get to the development of that?
Um. Well, I wanted to kind of dive into short stories, just kind of almost as like promotion for my like when I make bigger books, of like in the name of like putting yourself out there. Um. So I came up with two different ideas, but I just ended up publishing them as a together in Mortal Faith. Um. I don't know. I guess I didn't want to like do the submission process. I've gotten more into that recently, but it's kind of like stressful for me a little bit. Like all the rejections, all the submissions, and this and that, which is partially why I'm like some more self-published author. So yeah, I put them out on Amazon like that because that's just how I prefer to do it.
Okay. And how did you get the idea of the plot of what the actual stories are? How did you get to writing them?
Well, just like I just had like random ideas and I just put them in my notes app and I just like, oh, this is kind of cool. I say that a lot, I guess, but it's just like combining a lot of different things together, and just sort of finding the patterns in them.
Okay, and then like slowly kind of interweaving everything when you get like a grander idea where you want to go.
Yeah.
So walk me through your process, like how you get your ideas. Like how like an inception process that you wake up one day and some idea goes into your head and then you just start scribbling away or no?
I feel like it's a bit different each time. But I think I take a lot of inspiration from outside sources, and and I'll like for example, one story in Moral Faith was based on the Aztec god. I'm probably gonna say this wrong, but like Quetzalcoatl, and like I knew of that idea, and I've been researching that figure a little bit, and I was like, okay, well, it's kind of like a dragon and what if we found its skeleton, if it was like the skeleton of a god? And like, what if humans found that, and what would be the themes kind of surrounding that? And, what would what character would be best to present this story? And so I kind of built it from there, built it from this just like idea and this research that I had done.
Hmm. Now that immediately made me think of like the writing that I read from Shadow of Hades, and you have a really good sense of like setting and like really getting the environment ready and just like putting the reader in the shoes of the character like exactly the way that you want it to be. Well, how I picked it up anyway. So knowing that your genre is horror and that seems to be kind of like a driving line between your things, how do you, and if I'm wrong please correct me, but how do you view horror? How do you write horror? To you, what is the setting of horror? Because it's not like you can have like a jump, like a ghoul jump out of a corner. It's not going to be scary in text.
Yeah, just have like they turn the page and it's a drawing. It's like a
Ah!
pop-up book.
That's actually, that
um,
would be awesome, man. We could do that. We
um,
could do that.
yeah, but I wouldn't say I'm a horror author as much as that's just more like a phase I've been in recently.
Hmm.
Um, I was reading It by Stephen King at the time, so that definitely inspired it. Uh, how do I approach horror? It's like I don't know if I didn't think of it as horror at the time. I thought of it as more like supernatural, paranormal, and the more horror elements just kind of came in like through the plot and through what was happening, and like psychologically what I was putting my characters through and like their own lives. Like even the kind of boring parts could be scary, the things that their lives that they were leading and how they were like suppressing themselves. And I wanted to kind of like interpret that also throughout the fantasy aspects. And I know like I was thinking one part of like when I was writing gore, kind of like gorier scenes, it didn't feel gross to me. It felt like there's a pretty way to describe things like that. I feel like, it's natural. And I thought like the natural world has beauty and it has ugly things, and you just kind of combine those into one, and it can be scary, but it can also be like really impactful, and it can be both.
Now, I liked a lot of what you said there. Can you elaborate on what you said about how there could be the horror in the mundane? Because if I can be honest, the moment you said that, I mean, I don't think I've ever had that thought before, but the moment you said that, I just knew in my heart that was right. Just thinking back on, I had like I almost lived like another life right now. I just had a flashback of all the movies, all the TV shows I ever watched, and the really good ones always had like this great sense of like turning up the thriller aspect over like dumb things like
Mm-hmm.
Get Out. Obviously, the whole movie Get Out was a really good like horror like thriller type of thing. But in the beginning, there's like a lot of scenes that like they turn up the tension to like nine for over nothing, over like him going to the bathroom or like things like that, or in that movie Midsommar. Oof, that was another really good one, and they did the same thing. So can you elaborate on that? Like how do you translate that?
Well, I think it's a lot of like psychological stuff I'm really interested in. I watch a lot of like video essays on YouTube about like horror things. I don't watch a lot of horror movies, but I'll watch these essays like breaking them down, and it's like, okay, this is scary because this happened to this character earlier and it's coming back. And this, and I listen to a lot about like camera shots and how they frame things. And like I'm kind of jealous of films because they get the visual aspect of it too. So I try to incorporate kind of those techniques into writing as best I can. And that's mainly through framing things both psychologically and visually, in a sense, to kind of elicit that sort of fear, and like not necessarily supernatural like fantasy things, but like in the kind of like duller moments.
Hmm. Now, my second question actually kind of leads into my third, and it was something because you are right. Well, obviously you're right about your own writing, but when I was going through your thing, the common through line wasn't necessarily horror; it was more supernatural. But I immediately edited that to horror because I always contrived the two. To me, they're equal parts. It's like to say science fiction. I don't know. I don't even know what a derivative of that would be, but like you understand what I'm saying. To me, I thought they were the same thing. It was like saying comedy and
Yeah, well, it's
humor.
like the unknown, the things we can't conceive of.
Yeah. So I like. So could you educate me on what you think the difference of that would be and why you think that's a significant difference? But also, and I think it ties into the next question of I like what you said about that there is a pretty way of describing gore. You know, there's a that Quentin Tarantino shot of like the blood spewing and it goes over the white flowers. You know, I do agree with you on that, but it's again a thought I never really had before. So could you like elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, well, about the paranormal and horror sort of distinction, I actually recently went with a friend to this place in Vegas. I live in Las Vegas called Zach Baggins Haunted Museum, and like going through it, they have like this memorabilia from like serial killers, and they also have like ghost kind of stuff like that. And they're describing the stories behind these things, and I'm looking at it. It's like this haunted doll, and it's like this goes into the other question too. It's like it's haunting, but it's like also kind of pretty. And when you know the story behind it, it's also very like it just sort of adds to it in a sense to where it's not necessarily scary anymore. It's just like it's a story in and of itself. It has a lot of different aspects to it. It depends on how you look at it, really.
Hmm.
Um, and about the kind of like gore thing describing it, I really had that thought while I was writing because it was like I was describing like um, fairies eating this dead animal because in my story the fairies are like kind of like parasitic, so they were like consuming this like dead creature, and it was just like taking things that are normally pretty and normally ugly and just like combining them just makes like nature really to me, and it's just that in itself just is very beautiful.
That is beautiful, man. Huh. Off the top of your head, do you like what are your favorite examples of like books or TV shows or movies that you think kind of convey those thoughts and inspired you to kind of start thinking this way?
Well, I said before I was reading like Stephen King's It at the
Hmm,
time, and that has a lot of the psychological sort of aspects of their like daily lives. But
definitely.
in terms of his horror and like his fantasy, I would laugh at a lot of it. It wasn't really scary to me, but the way he would describe some things, like you really pay attention to that because he's a good writer. He's good at describing things, and so like the poetry and how he used imagery to convey the scary things that he was doing kind of stuck out to me. And I was like, I want to do that too. I'm gonna copy that in a sense. Um, that's not the only example. I'm looking at my bookshelf right over here.
Hmm.
Um, that's all I can think of right now
By the
because I
way,
don't read horror.
no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying I don't read a lot of horror and stuff. So
Well, based on what you're saying, it doesn't even necessarily need to be horror. Like I said, I brought up Quentin Tarantino, like the whole
mm,
idea of like how gore, or a great example I just thought of that kind of is similar. I don't know if you ever seen the movie Reservoir Dogs.
mm,
It's one of his
no,
first. It's one of his first movies, and there's a scene that there's a torture scene, and the bank robber is torturing a cop, and he cuts off his ear, but he's doing it to like a really jazzy like song. And at one point he like talks to his ear like, oh, can you and, like have like the whole thing, and like it's supposed to be gory as hell obviously because you just cut this dude's, and it's not like they edit it in a way that it doesn't show it. They show it, an ear coming off and all that, Van Gogh style and all that, and for whatever reason you're like laughing. It's like kind of funny. Or like Natural Born Killers does the same thing, that every time they do like a kill scene, it's always like this like crazy happy go lucky music, and they're always like laughing, and like the movie's like black and white, but it slowly turns into color during the kill scenes. It's like weird, but also kind of interesting of because of the point that you said.
yeah, it's like the contrast really kind of elevates it in our minds. I think.
Yeah. Huh. So going on now to the third book, right? You went from Easy Nans, right?
Eisenman.
Eisenan. Oh my god. Eisenan. Eisenan's Web. Then you go to the Mortal Door, Mortal Death. Did I say it wrong?
Mortal Faith.
Mortal Faith?
Yeah, Faith.
I'm sorry. Again, I still have that cover in my head. I don't know why. I can't get it out of my head. And then you have Shadow of Hades. Now, Shadow of Hades really stood out to me just because of the interior design of it. One, I like the way that, and two, and a thing that I really want to ask you is that you are a believer in the prologue. That I feel like that is such a hot debate right now, especially in the indie community, where like there are people I've read that are just on the opposite end of it completely. No such room for a prologue. Go right into the chapter one. People want the action, and then there's people on the other side that it's like it's art. You can't really certain things need an intro. You can start at chapter one, but this one needs to start at prologue. Leave me alone.
Well, I think in certain cases, like not the prologue isn't necessary, but
Mm.
it's useful in some cases because like, and it depends on how you do it. Of course, like with everything, if you just use it just like info dump, of course nobody's gonna be interested in that. You're gonna want to get into the story, but if you use it to kind of like cleverly call back to something or to make readers go like, oh, so this happened, before and this impacts this, just like having them bounce around that I might use the prologue for. In the Shadow of Hades, when I was writing it, it was more like it was really short. I think prologues should be short if you do have them, because they're not the main story; they're just an opening. But with mine, I was just sort of describing like a moment, uh, and sort of like to set the tone of the rest of the story.
Very cool tone that you set. Like that last line specifically. I don't want to drop any spoilers for you, but yeah, very cool intro. And then like it leads into the chapter, into part one, and you have the two quotes from Edgar Allan Poe, which you honestly, which you don't read, and then Frida.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I actually with well, the Edgar Allan Poe quote. Well, I had a book, and I was just sort of like flipping through it, and I found it, and I thought it was really like it really fit, and I sort of looked more into it, but I didn't read all of it, but I have the book right here, and I'm gonna look for it right now.
and
The Edgar Allan Poe quote like really seemed to like frame my entire thought process with the story, and
yeah,
I have
definitely.
another quote. I guess I have a part two, but the Frida Kahlo quote actually comes back in with one character story, like very specific in a very specific sort of way. So I thought that'd be very neat, and I just really love her as a person because I was like really into her at the time.
I have a book of her right here. Obviously, you can't see it because that's not how cameras work, but I'm looking at it right now. She's a very huge inspiration to me too, and like her house in Mexico, like that colorful villa. I want to go there so badly.
Yeah, my aunt actually took two of my cousins there one time, and I feel like for Frida for me is because like I'm half Mexican on my mom's side, and but like I didn't grow up with that, so it feels like kind of exploring her life helps me feel more connected to myself and sort of because like I want to go there and I want to feel like what she felt because she was mixed as well, so
Yeah, and very interesting life too. I mean, that woman's on some other stuff, but as far as like the quote, I 100%. I was just Josh. I was just pulling your leg. I actually did the exact same thing in my first. I've now taken it away, but my book used to start with a quote. This all happened, well, more or less, from Kurt Van Galt's Slaughterhouse Five, and I've never once read that book, but it's like exactly what you said. It was a quote that you find, and it just seems to tie in the entire the entire element of the book. It feels like it boiled down the entire 70, 80,000 words that you wrote, and boiled it down into 7 words perfectly. I don't know how.
yeah.
um and kind of going on that note, do you ever feel like there's anything in your writing that, especially when you get to like when when things are kind of plotted out, like what's going to happen in chapter 8 and you're reading and you're writing chapter 2, do you ever get that like hint of like foreshadowing that you yourself like make a line, or like you say something, you make a piece of dialogue that you almost laugh to yourself, like, oh my god, I wonder if people understand how like of an Easter egg this is for like later on. You ever have those moments?
Oh, I live for those moments in
Yeah,
books.
yeah,
It's sort of like building the subtext of it
yeah,
up. I try to do that a lot. Um, and I really hope, because I'm the kind of person that like loves to dig into things and like, oh, this connects to this, and this is the lore for this, and all of that. That's why I love Game of Thrones a lot. So that's sort of what I try to do here. And I think this book hasn't run across anybody quite as obsessive as that, or like as I am. But yeah, I put a lot in there that some of it doesn't even lead anywhere, but I really try to make it all connect.
yeah. Me too. And I put like a lot. Same thing. I put like a lot of subtext. And again, it's one of those things that like you kind of like hope on first day there's gonna be somebody who goes like, oh man, yep, this connects to that. But in reality, I mean, like we're still looking at Shakespeare stuff and picking up new things, you know.
Yeah,
But again, that's why literature is so awesome because it really does live on like another level, like further than music, further than a lot of things. It goes lengths, you know. Um, and kind of going into that, specifically everything with Shadow of Hades. How did you get the inception of that idea? How did you get the idea of start writing about um Ilea? What's her name? Ilea? Aella.
Isla,
Say it again.
Isla.
Isla? Yeah,
I
Isla.
changed I changed pronunciation. I said I changed Ayla, Ayla. Um, so there was like two different story ideas that came together there. They were like years apart. The first story came from like a dream that I had, or not a dream, but like I woke up before school one morning and I saw this like shadow figure at the side of my bed with like really dark black wings, like shadow wings. And I was like, oh, is that? And then my first thought was like, that's Hades. And I was like, in my sleeping state, I was like, that's Hades. um, but then I'm going throughout my day and I was like, it's a shadow. It's more like his shadow. What if Hades had a shadow and what would that mean? And I just sort of like in biology class, I was like, oh, if Hades represents death, then what does the shadow represent? It must be like life or something. So I was like, oh, this could be a book. And what if like, all this stuff happened? But then I was writing it and it wasn't really going anywhere. So I headed aside. I was like, this is going to be a short story. I'm not going to do anything with this. And then like maybe a year or two later, I had an idea for a story about witches in like this fantasy world. And then it wasn't fully fleshed out at all. So, but I had a few ideas for a few characters that I wanted to do. And so I put them all together into this one sort of real life setting, and then I just kind of like went from there. It seemed like a lot at the time, but I just figured that a good idea would have like layers to it, and those are sort of the layers that I wanted to have.
hmm. Now, going forward from that, taking what you've learned from the three books you've written before, how do you approach creating new content now? Like, what is the future for Paul Williams?
Um, what's creating new content now? In terms of like story ideas, or in terms of like my just sort of like plan for how it's gonna go.
Oh, I mean, however, I was talking about books, but if you're gonna go into graphic novels, if you're working with a production company to make a movie, I mean, I'll be interested to hear any of that.
No, not nothing like that, but I do want to keep writing, um, because I've got just like a ton of potential ideas in my head.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't think far into the future. I don't make plans. um, yeah, I just play it by ear, but I know that I want to keep doing this, and that's what I'm gonna do for as long
Mm.
as I want to.
So, how is the to get to the nitty gritty? How was the technical aspects of getting Shadows of Hades done in production? As I said, it was a beautiful interior, and again, it is out on Amazon now. I recommend it. Paul Williams' book. Go pick it up. Support the author. I'm telling you, well worth it. But how did you get into the actual nitty gritty of that? Actually making it. That you get somebody else to format it. The little images you have at the top of the page. How did any of that come into being?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you've ever come into contact with her Instagram account, but Julia Scott, she does like a lot of formatting services for other indie authors. She's really into that. So I emailed her on her website, Even Star Books. It's called. I emailed her before I was done editing, and I was like, "Hey, um, I would like this sort of package that you have set up here for my book." And I planned it like months and months in advance, and then she came through with the design for it, and yeah, it looks really good. You know, I wasn't very much involved in that process. I gave some feedback, but I more or less just let her do her own thing. Um, you know, and I hired a cover designer on their own in terms of like the design process. My first book I made, I designed the cover myself. Um, I was in graphic design classes at the time, but it wasn't what I wanted it to be. So I was like, you know, for now, I'm gonna just sort of outsource this to people who can do it better than I can right now. Even though I do love art, I don't really have the tools that I need right now. Um, in terms of like technical editing and things, I have this one editor I went to for the past book, but I don't think I'll be going to them again. I think I'm gonna find somebody new, but they did edit it, and that was sort of most of the technical aspects of how it came to be. The process for publishing on KEP is always pretty much the same, so just putting it together.
Hmm. And how do you feel? Do you have any plans to? Because I know that only Izanon's web is a paperback, and the other ones are Kindle. Do you have any future plans to re-release like a Shadow of Hades into another paperback into a
Shadow of
hardcover?
Hades,
Say
Shadow
that
of
again.
Hades is paperback. I've got a copy right here. Shadow of Hades is paperback.
Man, what is Amazon trying to tell me? What is Amazon trying to
I've
tell
had
me?
some trouble with Amazon and how
Uh,
they do things.
Well, I am sorry. Yeah, go ahead and show that off again for the people.
Yeah, this is actually the proof copy, so it's got this little bar in the front.
Nice.
But yeah,
Back
here's
cover
like
two
the
in the spine.
chapter. Yeah, here's the chapter design you were talking about.
Yeah.
Back cover, spine.
It's an awesome feeling to hold your work, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
How old were you when you well, all right, well you're 20 now, 17, so what? You were like 16, 17 when you published your first book?
I was 17. Yeah, last year of high school.
Man, how
I've
was
been
how,
working since I was like.
how was that feeling?
Um, when I finally got to publishing, because this was all I wanted to do, it was a little bit underwhelming for me at the time, but it definitely got a lot of attention from teachers and students and things when I would bring it up. And I got my book in the school library, which was like, it's going to be there forever now. This book by me, I went to the school and now my book is here. And the librarians were like so stoked. They were like, "Yeah, let's put it up and let's show it." But I was like, "Yeah, my book's here." um, I was like, nobody's gonna check this out in the future. This is gonna sit there. But I was so proud that it was there. Um, but yeah, I think it was sort of all that I wanted since I was like 14 years old, and that's what I was working through all throughout high school to the like detriment of my homework. Um, so finally getting there was just like it felt more like I'd accomplished a goal in terms of like working, and it didn't feel very like magical. But I was still very proud of it.
And how were your friends about it? Because even now, talking to like adults about it that like reading, still no enthusiasm about it. You know what I mean? How are friends in like high school about it? Were they really supportive?
Uh, they were super. Yeah, they were really supportive. They were super happy for me and super stoked. One of my friends, the library did this book signing for local authors, and I went there. And one of my friends was like, "Yeah, I want to go with you. I want to help you out." And like, I'm kind of quiet. I'm kind of shy, and they were over here like, "Yeah, check his books out." And they were going to other people's stands, and like, "Oh yeah, you should see my friend over there." um, they were just helping me out a lot. And then we had like, this is a little story, but we had this like little bowl of candy, and she was like, "Oh yeah, you can't take one unless you get a book. You can't take a candy unless you get a book." And I was just like, and the guy that was like, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good plan." And there's like, this is like a tangent, but there's another story where this lady saw the cover, and at the time it had like I had this star on it, and I was in like the South Carolina, and it's this very Christian community. This lady was like, "Oh, is that Satanism?" And I'm like,
Yeah, for
"No,
sure.
no, it's not Satanism, ma'am." She was like, "Oh," but then she grabs a piece of candy And it's like I was making a joke like, oh, she'll worship the devil for some Snickers, which I thought was kind of funny at the time.
Very funny.
um, yeah, but yeah, my friends were super supportive of me, and they still are, which is really nice. And of course, the community on Instagram and everything.
Yeah, phenomenal community, phenomenal community. So, how do you treat all the nuances of being like a indie author nowadays? How do you treat the marketing? You just said, and I actually would like if you would elaborate a little bit more too on, no reason to trash anybody, but why is it that you felt that you have to find a new editor? Because I feel that's a common thread that I've been hearing left and right, and I really think that we should make it a little more public for people that are becoming aspiring authors.
Yeah, well, I think right now I'm seeing all these the true world of self-publishing open itself up in terms of all these different avenues that you can go through and all these different people that do these different things and these groups and all. Because before when I published, it was just like I have a book, I wrote it, I published it. You know, that was sort of it. That was where it began and ended. But now it's like being even more invested in this community. It's like there's so many facets to it that can get overwhelming at times. But learning it, especially with the community around the writers on Instagram, is uh, kind of fun. You know, it's like just helping each other learn and like sharing research that we've done about certain things and marketing and all this stuff. Um, and there's a fear that comes with that. That's like what if I'm not good enough at this, so that my work never goes anywhere. But I think if you're a writer, I think publishing inherently kind of interests you, or like it should, because it's interesting as a business, as a brand, to sort of like build yourself up in that way. And it can be fun at times, but it's definitely scary. um and in terms of like editing about that, um I think because I had it edited and then I sent it off to beta readers, and when they read it, they pointed out like tons of like grammatical stuff and not necessarily story things. I think nobody really had much to say on the story, but and that was one of the reasons with the editor that I had. He didn't say anything on the story. He said like, and it felt nice to hear him say like, "Oh yeah, it's good, it's tight," but like I would have liked to hear the strengths of what he thought were good about it, But he was just like, "Oh yeah, I didn't have any thoughts about that." Um, and I was like really careful who I wanted to pick for my editor when I started looking, because I was like, "Oh, some person I went to had a typo on their website," and I'm like, "How can I trust you with my book if you spelled this word wrong on the website, you didn't catch that?" um, I want to be really careful with who I chose. And this editor wasn't bad, but I think there's more that they could have done, and there's definitely more experienced people. So it's not necessarily the editor themselves. Maybe they just weren't to that point where they were ready to uh, to be like, I don't know, I guess better. But yeah, it's like definitely getting what you paid for, a lot of that, and like getting research. You go into a person, their background, do they have an English degree, do they have experience with books before, how many books have they done. It's definitely like almost like you're interviewing someone for a job. You have to understand what they do, how long they've done it for, and you have to make sure that they're right for what you're about to put out.
Hmm. Yeah, editor is a very interesting. It's like having like a really good mentor. Like when you have, I haven't found it yet, but when I find a good editor, I'm sending fruit baskets, Christmas card. I've never done that in my entire life, but I will start. I'm calling them twice a day. How you doing? Hey, how you doing? Whatever I got to do to maintain that relationship, I'm gonna do it because they really are worth their weight in platinum and gold and vibranium, whatever you want to think about it.
Yeah,
Just and everything you say really holds true. Specifically, the aspect of like there's so much to learn, and thankfully there's like the awesome community on Instagram and Twitter and everything. And I actually have your social media pages up. We'll highlight those in a minute too. Um, but yeah, specifically marketing. Is there anything that you've learned from marketing that is kind of up and down? Like what have been your pitfalls and what have been your lessons so far?
um well, I think the biggest thing, kind of the sort of arc I'm going through with marketing right now is I hired someone to help me market uh, towards this towards the tail end of publishing. Well, not the tail end, but like when I was getting ready to publish Shadow, I found a website and that had like really good reviews and like they had a good track record. So, and I had saved up enough at the time before quarantine and all to afford them, and I got decent results with that. But um, I think one thing, main takeaway from that I learned was I, as an author, just as a person, have the power to go outside of the traditional avenues that I have in the past to email these places that might seem inaccessible, these magazines, these online blogs. Um, as long as I have like a decent professional sounding email and like maybe a little press release written up, as long as I have that, there's a chance of getting their attention. You don't have to have someone professional necessarily do this for you. It's a world that you can jump into on your own. And that's sort of the main thing I learned is that branching out into more aspects of this sort of outside of the social media community alone was a big thing that I learned from that. And that's sort of what I'm trying to do right now is like use all the tools available. I just recently started up another Facebook. I'm workshopping my website. I went to a meeting about marketing at a local library here, with this one author. She had a lot of useful like tips and places you could go. BookBub. Yeah, I think it was called BookBub.
I just did an interview with
Facebook
them.
ads. Yeah.
Yeah, BookBub.
Um,
Shout out to them.
and yeah, um, a lot of different ways you can go about it. It's networking and it's all these other things with other authors. And it's definitely a slow process of building, especially for me because I'm not very like social. I have to work at it, but it's definitely worth it, and it's definitely fun at times.
Hmm. I mean, without a single doubt. So pivoting on to kind of where you're at now, your headspace currently. What do you think is gonna be? Do you ever see a future? Do you switch genres altogether? Do you think you'll ever go into sci-fi? Do you think that you'll kind of teeter away from the paranormal? Do you think you'll go more? Because I did say that I did hear that had a phase of gore. Do you ever think you'll kind of go back into that, get into the whole like Saw level of blood spitting?
Oh well, I wasn't like big into gore. I just think that there's elements of it in a lot of different stories, a lot of different genres, and the way you write it in a certain way, which is my mindset with that. But yeah, I'm not like married to a specific genre. Um, I wrote a short sci-fi story actually recently that I have been shopping around to like magazines and things online that I've been doing recently. Well,
Collective
and I
Tales.
kind of
Did you
yeah,
send
Collective
it to them?
Tales. I just did that a couple days ago, and I was nervous because I was like I gotten like 2 or 3 rejections before, and but those were from like the big magazines.
Hmm.
um, and they want something. They have all these criterias and all this and that, and I hadn't done it before, so I was just really learning about that. But I did submit to Collective Tales. I read Collective Darkness recently. I reviewed it on my Instagram page and on their Amazon. Um, so I'm hoping that works. But Collective Visions is the name of the anthology right now, the sci-fi.
Mm-hmm. I'll
Yeah,
my short story, The Last Planet, is in there.
yeah. Coming out next year, right?
Yeah, spring 22. Yeah,
Yeah. Um,
I had them. I think they were like my fifth guest. Shout out to them too, Elizabeth and Jonathan.
yeah. You had them both at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Hey. uh, yeah, they actually had Jonathan on. He's gonna be his episode is releasing this Monday. I had him and Jen Elwin. Elwin, she was one of the. I can't remember the
Yeah.
name of her short story, but she was in the
It
Collective
was in
Darkness
Collective
as well.
Darkness, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was, I think hers was one of my favorite ones.
Yes, she. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm waiting back to hear from her about her schedule about like a personal episode because we only had like a short little like 40-minute quick little thing. And I don't
Hmm.
even think we hit 40 minutes. I think it was like 35 minutes, a quick little. I had like a lot of other stuff going on, and they did too. It was kind of like scheduled that way. But and not only that, but she's an audio engineer, and like her interview. I mean, within 20 minutes, I was like foaming at the mouth. I'm like, oh, I need more from this person. So definitely, without a doubt, I think my favorite story was actually from Elizabeth's brother, the very first one in Collective Darkness.
Yeah, yeah.
Oof.
I don't remember what it was called,
The
but
Howl, I
I
think
was
maybe right, something like that.
it was something I can't remember
I
offhand.
can't remember either, but man, it was good. Man, it was good.
But yeah, and that creature at the end was just like, yeah, that was like inspiring almost.
Yeah. Um, just really powerful stuff. It's really this whole process. I mean, everything that like the whole Instagram community really has opened my eyes, especially like just hearing you like, oh, that like this is what you wanted to do since you were 14. That's so together. I mean, like I when I let's think back 14. What I was doing at 14? I don't even think I had a thought in my head at 14. I was such an idiot. Like all I had was just like running around, and that was like my only idea of like logic, just running around with my friends doing whatever. Uh, I believe in eighth grade, my idea was I was gonna be a cartoonist. My big thing was that I would take like printer paper, fold it in half, a couple of sheets, right? That would so kill like at least what 3 4 trees, staple it each end, do a couple
Yeah.
like little drawings, shitty as hell, barely in the lines, horribly drawn, and I would crank them out. And if you ask me what I was doing, that, and then what do I go to college for? Engineering. Hey, gotta hit him with the curveballs. And I'm telling you, like even when I told my parents my senior year where I was gonna go to college, and like my family and whatnot, they just all looked at me and was like, "All right, never once have you said that you even kind of liked engineering. Where is this coming from?" And I was just like, "Hey, leave me alone. What are you talking about?" Uh, and then in school, senior year, it's like when I started like thinking about that as a possibility because I just really liked the idea, and I realized, like me playing with toys and like and like remembering the plots vividly to this day. I can tell you almost everything, and there actually is one
Mm.
plot that I'm waiting for. I made it when I was like 12, and I was even then I was like, "Yo, not bad." It had like time travel in it, and it was like crazy, and it like looped towards the end. It literally took me a year to come up with that idea, like when I did it in like real time.
Mm.
Uh, and yeah, I definitely without a doubt I'm gonna reuse that without a doubt. Uh, and another thing that I really like is that you seem to have kind of like a connection with your heritage and your culture, or at least a longing to get more vibrant within it. Specifically with the whole Frida thing and all that. And I'm Dominican, and I do the same thing. I have an idea that I actually just broke down yesterday. I had a long chat with my friend Lori on Instagram. She has the class of '95 and the Dormant Howl coming out soon, and she helped me just break everything down and crack everything down to a fine point. And it's kind of a historical fiction about the colonization of like DR and all that. And I'm hella excited about it, and I'm so excited about it because it's like my culture. So, do you have any ideas like that, or anything that you're really passionate about that you want to work in the future? And maybe if you don't have an idea about it now, maybe you want to work on it later.
I don't have any ideas about like that right now. Later, I mean, there's no telling. I could be interested in that. But my realm is definitely um more fantastical stories that I want to tell. Not necessarily dr- based like based like solidly in any kind of history or like specific culture. I definitely feel more comfortable, you know, making things up as I go.
Hmm. Well, then kind of turning down
But
its
yeah,
head
definitely
then.
taking inspirations. Well, yeah, taking inspirations from them are important. But yeah, never like being like grounded in one area.
Hmm. Now, turning that on its head then, would you ever see a future? Would you ever see yourself writing something that takes those cultures, takes the Mexican culture, takes the all the different cultures that you have that you're intertwined with that you're even interested in? You said that you were interested in the Roman and the ancient Greeks and all that. Do you ever think that you'll kind of formulate a whole fantasy world that kind of imagines those cultures and like your own viewpoint through your own voice?
I'm actually working on something like that right now. Actually, I just recently finished the first draft and I started editing it myself. I'm in the process of doing that. It's three perspectives, so I'm editing one character's perspective right now, and it's definitely helping me learn because I got a book from the library, looking at it right now, A Day in the Life of Rome, and like I was just reading through it to see how they lived and taking inspiration from it and like putting it together, and like all these different literary theories of like appreciating culture instead of like appropriating it, and the fine line you walk where you don't want to be like offensive in a way, and you want to make sure you understand the sources you're drawing from and use them in a way that's not like uh, inconsiderate, I
Hmm.
guess. And that just comes from like learning about it and like what it is and what builds it up, so that you can make sure that you can twist it and use it in a way that's not a caricature or a stereotype of itself.
Very good point. Do you have like any like examples of your head that you can think of really good examples of it, and the kind of like really bad examples where they kind of drop the ball?
Um, in like other stories, I know I probably come back to Game of Thrones a lot, but that's a lot of like I'm a huge nerd for it. But
Hmm.
George R. R. Martin is really big into history, even like throughout, like he studied it like really closely, and he's all had a lot of years to do it. So he's really good with like that. But even his stories, I've seen people break it down where it's like, you know, here's this like common trope of this culture that's like kind of negative and that, reflects badly on this plot even. It's not even just outside of the story itself, it's like within the story. It affects how you might view certain characters, and maybe they're not as good as you think they are because of what they're doing. But what they're doing, you wouldn't really think twice about it if you didn't understand the culture that it's based off of. But I think he's done a really good job of like being careful with that. But even he has problems, so you can really use him as an example for both good and bad examples of kind of using culture. And I think it's always a very fine line, a very slippery slope when you do these things. You just have to make sure that you're telling the best story that you can at the end of the day.
Hmm. Without a single doubt. Now, kind of going into that, because Game of Thrones has been out for quite a while now, and like you said, as far as like the next book coming out, TBD. So, what is the latest thing that you've been watching? What's the latest thing that you've been watching on Netflix, TV? What is the latest book you've been reading? What's the latest thing you're consuming?
I finished the series The Magicians on Netflix recently because the final season finally came out. Um,
We can talk about
that
that
series
show.
is, um, I like it enough. Um, I'm still His Dark Materials, The Golden Compass, that
Mm,
series on BBC. They just finished the second season, and I'm like waiting for the third one. I read the books. I read the last one 2 years ago, and I'm really following that. It's pretty good so far. In terms of books I'm reading right now, I've got like a long kind of like list of books that I want to read, but I'm reading a biography actually of Frank Herbert, the guy who wrote Dune,
mm-hmm.
because Dune the movie is coming out, so I want to kind of brush up on that a little bit. I wanted to buy a copy of Dune, but they were all sold out. Um, so I thought it would be kind of unique to just look up on his life, just as a person, as a writer.
That is. I'm sorry, I got sidetracked when you said that Dune is sold out. Sold out? They're sold out of a print book. That's how much attention that this movie is garnering. Like, damn, when is the Allegory of the End movie coming out so I can start selling copies? What are we doing? That's why we need to start working on the right the Shadow of Hades. When is that? When is Netflix picking that up for 3 seasons in a movie? Uh, but talking about the magicians, I have to ask your opinion. Um, because there's a friend. I have a friend who I have two friends that I value their opinion in literature highly. Uh, Honestly, one more so than the other, but I'm not going to tell which one. But well, I guess it depends. One I value more for books. One I value more for like TV and whatnot. The one that I value more for TV is the one that watches anime and whatnot. The person that recommends all that stuff to me. So he's the person that recommended The Magicians to me. So I watched The Magicians, and I mean, we were both like having like a long chats about it, like talking about the intricacies and like how great it was. And I remember at season two, I complete like I think not in season two. I believe it was like maybe mid season three around something like that. I just dropped it. Like I was like done with the show. And he, on the other hand, was actually still really into it. So I'm in. So it's not one. It's not a show that I can just write off as being bad. Bad. Obviously, there's something I'm not picking up on it. But how do you feel about the show?
Mm, I think I'm kind of like that in like I really liked season one and how creative it was and
Oh,
all the ideas
the
behind
first
it.
episode.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I know the book itself, a lot of people, or like the book series, I know they're really different, but people are saying that, they prefer the show over the books, um, which is interesting. I might want to look into the books later. But in terms of the series as a whole, it definitely has its issues. I think it got a little bit self indulgent towards like as it went on. Um, yeah, but I think I stayed more for the characters, and maybe I continued it because I wasn't able to watch the seasons back to back to back. I think the time I had between watching the seasons really helped me. It helped me in distracted me in a little bit because you kind of forget what happened last season, but it also kind of
Hmm,
erases the bad parts. So I want to go back and I want to rewatch all of it. But
don't.
man, I just really liked some of the storylines, and I particularly liked Julia's whole arc. Towards the end of the story, how I felt like that was really empowering.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I have to agree with everything that you said. The main thing, because I think we're kind of alike that we're huge fans of like lore. Like any little like element of lore, even if it's like a 3 second like sentence, if it can allow me to build up this all like crazy, that's my favorite thing because it just allows you to be like, oh, then you could blah blah blah. Like somebody I talked to this week said that the best thing that they quoted some other guy that was like a cinematography buff, and he was saying the most important things in a movie aren't what is shown on screen, it's what is shown outside of it. You know what I mean? Like the things that the environment builds up into your head that isn't even in screen, that isn't even in the frame. And I think that's really important. And specifically, the magicians did a great job of that. But as you said, I think it got self indulgent. That like they got caught up in like the relationship aspects of it. Like, listen, I'm not in high school anymore. I don't care about hookups and like oh she did this and they said that and now like whatever. Get on to the cool stuff that you're worrying about. And I think they got too much into the high school drama aspect of it after a little while.
Yeah, well, I think that was almost like a complaint, not the same, but like similar to people have with the books, where it was like they thought the main character was annoying or like whiny Quentin, um, and they thought it was like they were annoyed with him because they thought his like mindset was very like childish or like young. But I think these are like new college students, and having been in that, having kind of still being in that mindset, maybe I didn't mind it quite as much. But yeah, that's definitely a valid, very valid concern.
Hmm. That is a really good point about time frame. Well, you said a couple things that actually like just struck me as being very true. I mean, when I watched it, I binged it, so the whole difference in the seasons is like a glaring issue right there. And then also time frame. I mean, I started watching it like I think a year or two after my college run. You know what I mean? So like I was completely out of that mindset. But if I were to think back to like being 18, I think I would, 18 and just getting into college, new town, new everything. Yeah, for sure. I think I would kind of sync up a little bit more with those emotional plot lines. But the lore of it is unquestionable. I mean, the whole plot line with Elliot and Quentin, that like their whole like how they live like a whole life outside of another like together and then like come back and then they referenced it with
Yeah,
the whole thing about the peaches thing. I mean, jeez. I mean, the writing is just like intense to certain levels, but then it can get like a little formulaic, which was what kind of like what you said about the Rick Riordan thing. Or like there's certain scenes that you walk in and it's like, all right, let me guess, Margot is gonna say some crazy shit, everybody's gonna react, and then Elliot's gonna storm out and like whine about his girlfriend or whatever. No, his wife. There it is. That went missing or XYZ, and it just And there's nothing worse in writing than that. I think when you're like reading chapter 2 and you're like, all right, let me tell you what's gonna happen in chapter 9. There's nothing worse than
Yeah.
that. So kind of to put everything together, what do you think is the heart of your writing? Like, what is the core motivation? What is the core thing that you're trying to do with your writing? The core message you're trying to promote, if you have one.
Well, I think that kind of goes to what I find most valuable in stories themselves, and that's kind of finding a character or characters to sort of latch onto and to feel like their journey helps me on my own. Because that's kind of like, aside from like the lore and the history in the world, what I look for in a book is, if I really relate to a character, I'll love the whole series. And sort of with mine, I want to go into characters whose stories are real, whose stories that I can relate to, who have aspects that I'm dealing with, that I'm fighting with, and who fight with it themselves, and who you can learn from those examples and histories, and their personal struggles and things. So that's kind of the core of that I hope will be in all of my future books, in all of my current books, is just uh, deep characters who are very, very flawed, but who you can still root for.
Hmm. Going off that sentiment, what do you feel are, well, I'll break it up into two phrases. What is the favorite character you've ever created and why? And who is your favorite character in period? And you can even give me a top three if you feel that strongly about it.
The favorite character that I've ever created, I feel like it changes, but it's definitely someone from Shadow. I feel like all of them have aspects of myself in them, different kind of things that I want to see explored. They all explore different parts. So, in a meta sort of sense, I think they're all almost they're telling the same story that all goes back to myself, if that sort of makes sense. So I think it's almost like the story itself explores all these themes. That might be a little like a cop out answer, but I can't choose just one. Um, in terms of like outside media, um, I really find in terms of like going back to the Song of Ice and Fire, Daenerys' story was like really impactful to me in terms of like rising up and just from being a marginalized person and helping others, and wondering what you should do like when you're growing and gaining all these in like abilities in a sense, learning about the in terms of like incorporating it to my life, growing up and learning about the adult world, and just sort of navigating through that, where she's like going through ruling, it's not necessarily comparable, but
Hmm.
the feelings, the emotions, you can kind of reflect, the uncertainty, the fear, but also needing the courage to continue, and having the resilience, you sort of take from that, and I kind of use it to like inspire me in my daily life, kind of like how people were inspired by like old Greek heroes. I think some people say comic books are the new Greek mythology. You use these characters in your own life to sort of propel yourself in times when you don't have the motivation. And I think for me personally, Daenerys is one of those characters that's sort of like in my personal mythology, as like, I aspire to be motivated by this figure in my daily life.
Yeah, Daenerys is definitely something that has inspired a couple characters that I've created. But going off that riff of what you said, because I like that you said that a lot of your characters are kind of like derivatives of yourself. Is that how you create your characters? Like, take me through your character creation process. Is it something that you develop the lore and the environment and then the characters populate, or do you create a character and then the environment populates around it?
I think it goes side by side. I build them up next to each other, and they weave together in a sense. Uh, I don't like, for the idea for my characters, I don't go internally. I have an idea for them like externally, and then I build them like a shallow kind of version of them, like I don't want to say like an aesthetic, but like, you know, it's kind of like having like a character model like drawn,
Hmm.
but then not having their backstory. So as I decide what they're going to do in the plot, I kind of apply my feelings and my emotions about how I would feel if I were going through that, and where they would differ from me, and why I want to make them different, and why I want to explore different aspects of myself through them in a way. It's not always consciously, but I think that's sort of a broad sense of my process.
Hmm. And then as far as characters that now are all characters a mirror of yourself or only a selective few?
Um, I think whether I want them to be or not, I mean, I'm the one writing the story at the end of the day, and they all kind of come from me, and they're influenced by my experiences, by my life. Um, Definitely some more than others. If I'm in a character's head, it's me in their head.
Mm.
Even if they're wildly different from who I am, I'm the one that's driving the plot and where they fit into it. So I think, it's the difference between writing and like when someone makes music. Like if you make an album, and if a musician explains their album, they're like, oh, well, this is from my experience when I did this, or I wrote this because I went through this in the past. And I feel like with books, you want the suspension of disbelief. You want to believe that it's a story independent from the writer, but it's still art. It's still like music, like painting, like all that. Like it comes from the author themselves. And there's a reason why they told this story. There's a reason why they had this character do the thing that they did. There's a reason why they put certain aspects into the story. And I'm not saying that they should be linked always, but it's context from who created the piece of art that you're watching. There's always going to be the creator in there.
Hmm. Now, without getting too, I just realized how much time I said this episode. You can probably like edit it together and make like a whole new track. But uh kind of diving a little deeper into what you said about how the events uh you know not only fluctuate yourself but fluctuate how the characters live and everything, even if they're completely traumatic. I mean, completely different than your own life experiences. Now, without getting into anything too traumatic or anything too, insane, do you have any events in your life that you really think have been like a cornerstone, not only for the way that you think things, the way that you live, but also the way that you are able to meld that into your characters and your plots?
Uh, well, uh, I don't want to get into like a therapy
Oh,
session.
no, no, no! Like I meant more like like
No, no,
lighthearted things.
yeah. That was more on me. Like I don't want to delve too much into that,
Mm,
but I think a lot of my past and just things that I've gone through, things I'm still going through, um, every little thing just kind of combines into this big reference pool of reference that you have. And I definitely put aspects of, you know, things that I've gone through into the story, not like in an abstract way, but like even in a more concrete way. You know, some of the characters are in similar situations so that they feel similar things that I did. And that's kind of my way of expressing it because, um, you know, things that I can't say to the people outside, my thoughts, my feelings, will be expressed in this book. And that was kind of maybe more self-indulgent outlet for me to put a character kind of in a similar experience and to have them say the things that I couldn't say.
hmm. It's a beautiful sentiment. Now,
And I don't
no,
want to like
please.
come off as like I'm saying, you know, this is all very much linked to myself. I don't want to say that, that I still want it to be a story that stands alone by itself, because it is, but I just think it's important to consider where it comes from.
Hmm. Now, shifting notes, 'cause I want to show off your social media links and everything for the people watching on YouTube. So here we have the Instagram account. Make sure to follow that and everything. Beautiful accounts, beautiful art. You do this art yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So awesome stuff here. Do you want to dive into any of the pictures here? Oh, that's my picture.
Um, well, the three at the top, the characters that kind of are in a similar style, those are from the latest story that I'm writing that was inspired by like Greek and Roman culture and other stuff. So that's sort of where they come from. And I went a lot into like the dress. Like she's not Greek or Roman inspired. She's like more like I went for Polynesian and Japanese inspired for her. She's sort of from a different place. But I in here in the description I was like, you know, she only wears like men's clothing because that's what's available to her. And I designed the clothing. I said, you know, what colors would they have available? So that's sort of like how deep I went into the lore and history of what I wanted to portray.
Now, is her name Mel or Melee?
Melee is how
Cool.
I yeah.
Yeah, nice, like melee.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, I have to say I'm a huge fan of this one.
Mm.
I can get that like as like a still, have it like behind me. And then we have the Twitter account here. Nice little blurb from the book.
I'm not on Twitter as often as I am on Instagram, so
And then there's the 4 books on, well, and again, so this is Paul Carver Williams. There actually are a couple other Paul Williams on Amazon, so make sure Paul Carver Williams, check them out. Kindle, Amazon Unlimited. I'm telling you, it is well worth the investment. And I believe there's a couple. Oh yeah, and then there's the actual book itself, The Shadow of Hades, Mortal Faith. As I said, that cover that's just hypnotizing, man.
mm.
The moment I started, has not been able to leave my mind's eye. And then we have, oh, and this is the one that you produced. I actually really like that one.
No, I see. I changed it. I
Oh,
got it
this,
redone.
oh, this is a different
Yeah,
one. Okay. So yeah,
I
this is no what?
I could go to my bookshelf and get the one that I did, and if you want me to like show it,
Oh yeah, please do a little book tour. Do show all the books off that you got if you want.
I'll just grab the one that I.
What the hell? You just
So
appeared.
this is like the first design that I come up with. So the first design for Eisenand's web was this.
I mean, still a pretty good cover.
Yeah, but I wanted something that more represented the story itself,
Hmm.
and I didn't think I had the skill at the time to sort of show that through.
Well, with
But yeah,
the picture you just did of Melee, I mean, I think you definitely have the skills there. Um, so we're approaching the end of the podcast. So of this episode anyway, not the podcast. You know, oh my god. But the world's not ending, I promise. But do you have any final statements? Any last things that you want to say to the people?
um, something that might tie it all together. I think I've pretty much said a lot of what I wanted to say concerning like my new writings. But I mean, if you're a self-published indie author out there, um, keep going because your book is important. And I think it's important to support each other throughout this time. You know, I do author interviews on my account, so I mean, as well. So it's definitely important to gather strength from each other because you know it's rough. It's a competitive industry, and I think it's important to still uh, work through it together.
Without a single doubt, and honestly, words to live by. Do you have any other things that you want to promote? Any? You said the website's still under construction, but do you want to drop the URL for it so people can kind of get it in their head?
If they
Maybe
want to visit
keeping the bookmark.
the link tree in my Instagram has it's in there. So if you want to visit, you can go there. But uh, yeah, I really want to like make it its own URL so it's not like attached to a different website making thing. So
Oh, what is it currently attached to?
The website I used was GoDaddy.
And then what is the website URL?
Uh, let's see, I don't go to it often. I think it's Paul Williams author.
Oh, okay, yeah. So paulwilliamsauthor.com.
Yeah, it should be.
Let's get it up there just so we can show that off. Because I know I do have, I know I did have your link tree open. I just didn't see a website. It must have been all the way at the bottom. Oh, it is. Let's put it up for the people. Oh, I see what you're saying. It is a pretty long URL. You can't take that off on GoDaddy. I know you can with Squarespace.
I still got to look into it. So
But just so people can see it, Paul C. Williams books and the URL right there on the top. Make sure to check it out. Again, all the books are out there on Amazon, Kindle. You get the ebook, paperback. Do what you got to do. Make sure to support the indie community, and very specifically, Paul C. Williams. I was about to say Paul C. Carver. I was like, all right, wait a minute. You related to like a peanut guy? But again, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. Thank you for handling all this random rambling, and a true honor speaking with you.
yeah, thank you for having me. It was great.
That was weird. I think we had like a little weird feedback there. But anyway, this is the end of the podcast. AR's Tales, aka the A.R.T podcast. I am A.R. Mirabal, Paul C. Williams. Peace out. We will be back with you Wednesday for a new solo cast.